number 12 Clemson at number 5 Texas. It's a Saturday game, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, again on TNT or Max if you want to watch it on streaming. Dawn, you have the Texas passing game against the Clemson pass defense. So what should we look out for when Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns are throwing the ball?
Okay. All right. So there's 3 games this year where Texas has been held to under 20 points. All right. The 2 Georgia games and the Texas A&M game. The common denominator in all those games is those are the 3 games where they saw the most man coverage. All right. Clemson, look, they got a bunch of young kids back there in the secondary. Avion Terrell, Ashton Hampton, Jaden Lucas, Khalil Barnes in the slot. But they trust these kids. They trust them to play a lot of man coverage, okay? And I think they run a really high rate of cover 1. And you know what? Dabo Swinney's always trusted his DBs before, and he don't care how young they are. He's going to do it now. And look, Clemson's coming into this thing loose. They weren't even supposed to be here, right? Yeah. So, I think he's going to allow them to just play free and play man-to-man coverage. You know why? Because Quinn Ewers against man coverage this year has a 63.1 passing grade with 2 big-time throws and 5 turnover-worthy plays. You see my guys right there. Not bad. Not bad across the board. Ashton Hampton, I believe a true freshman, isn't he? Playing so. Like that. I mean, 77.7 in man coverage. Lucas, Barnes, and Terrell all solid in the mid to high 60s. I think this is, for me, if Clemson comes in here fearless on defense, and I think on the inside it's a fun battle, too, you're going to have between Peter Woods and TJ Parker, and then Texas offensive line, which did they win the Joe Moore Award?
Certainly they deserved it.
Certainly deserved to. I didn't see if they had won it or not, but either way, we think it's the best offensive line in the country. Look,
Army did.
Did they really?
Wow. Kind of love that.
How about it? But I think, look, Clemson, they've run the 18th most man coverage plays in the FBS this season. 81.2 team coverage grade while they're doing it, 25 forced incompletions. I think for me, let's go. I think it's a win-win situation for Dabo Swinney. Either, look, you throw these kids out there and they succeed and you go into Texas and pull off a huge upset, or there are a bunch of really young kids that are all coming back next year because Clemson retains most of their guys more than almost anybody. And you've got a situation where now they're this experienced, and I think Clemson going into next year, this defense could be an absolute house with all the freshmen and sophomores coming back next year. It's crazy how much talent they're going to have next year. But I think this is a spot where Texas has struggled against man coverage. Georgia in the biggest spots against them, especially last week. Think about an overtime. Think about the game Dalen Everett had against them, right? They're going to man up, and they're going to challenge Quinn Ewers to make throws into tight windows. And Clemson's forced a lot of takeaways this year. I believe they're tied with Notre Dame for the Power 4 lead in turnover margin. That's what we're going to be looking at, right, is Quinn Ewers with the turnover-worthy plays. Or I think it's 17 this season, right? That's where it's going to be. He's going to go tight man coverage, I think, and he's going to force Quinn Ewers to throw balls into tight windows.
Yeah, that could be the advantage they need in this game for Clemson, honestly. But I have the Texas run game against Clemson run defense. Really, is can the Tigers contain the Longhorns on the outside? Because a large chunk of Texas' ground game is centered around their ability to win on the outside. They've called outside zone 137 times this year, 8th most in the Power 4. And really, a big reason why I think they've called that so often, Dalton, they've got a awesome offensive tackle duo in Kelvin Banks Jr. and Cameron Williams, who are 2 top 25 prospects on PFF's 2025 NFL Draft Big Board. Contravion Wisner, 9th among Power 4 running backs with 345 rushing yards on outside zone runs this year. Both he and Jaden Blue, very good athletes at running back with the speed to create big gains if they get a crease. Clemson has had a lot of difficulties keeping contained this year. The Tigers have allowed 6 yards per carry on outside zone runs. That's the 6th most in the Power 4. TJ Parker has been really the only solid player on such plays. He's a 74.5 grade on outside zone runs. The other edge defenders, Dalton, have not been. Shaheem Lawson, A.J. Hoffler, Cade Denhoff, each have sub-60 grades on outside zone runs. And as a group, even including TJ Parker with his nearly 75 grade, they have the 3rd worst grade in the nation with a 49.7 grade on outside zone runs. among the edge defenders. So since Banks and Williams have the 17th best grade among tackle duos on outside zone runs, this could spell a lot of trouble for the Tigers in this game. So I really think if you look at it with Texas and how they run the ball and how much they utilize the outside zone game against Clemson's defense, that is not contained all that well. And we love TJ Parker, right? We talk about him all the time as a projected first-round pick in next year's draft. And he's been good against outside zone runs. But you need more than just one player on those plays. That's, I think, the big matchup in this one. I think it can Texas and their offensive tackles and Kelvin Banks Jr. and Cameron Williams. By the way, Banks we think is going to be able to play in this game. He obviously did not play in the SEC title game, but he was apparently very close to playing in that game. I would imagine 2 weeks from now, after that, he would play in this kind of game. But if he is out there, that is a big advantage, I think, for Texas' run game against the Clemson run defense.
And I just love the fact that they finally moved Peter Woods back to the inside, and I think that helps you out a lot, even against an outside zone team. Yes, they're trying to get to the edge. That's goal number one when you're running the stretch like that. Second is finding those cutback lanes. But if you have a guy like Peter Woods dominating on the inside, you can cut off those cutback lanes, and then you really force, then you start forcing things all the way to the sideline laterally, and Trey Weisner can't hit those holes. You're right. I think it's going to be a huge task. Again, for young kids, you're talking about true sophomores like Parker and Woods up front. DeMonte Capart's in there as well. He's a little older, but big piece of this also. So I think you got a really good matchup between this offensive line, Texas offensive line and the Clemson defensive line, despite, again, all of the youth in this unit.
Absolutely. So, Don, on the other side of the ball, you have the Clemson run game against the Texas run defense. What are you looking out for when they have the ball?
Yeah, I'm just kind of worried, if that makes sense. Clemson, I'm going to look at their last 4 games against FBS teams. I'm taking out a big game against the Citadel because why are we playing the Citadel in Week 13? Take those last 4 games, FBS games, 4.1 yards per carry, 65.4 rushing grade as a team. Honestly, over the last 5 weeks, Cade Klubnik's been their best runner.
Yeah.
They haven't not been able to get Phil Maffa going at all, and I think a big problem, the interior of this offensive line. They're always getting guys rotating in at guard. It's kind of a Clemson tradition, but this year, the inside 3, no matter who's been in there, they rank 83rd in the country in run blocking grade. And honestly, I just look at this as a problem because Texas defensive line is so good, and it starts with big number 95. Can we get the Alfred Collins graphic? Here we go. This is just a big monster. This is problem number 1 when you're trying to run the ball. And there's a bunch of problems, right? There's Vernon Broughton inside, who's really good too. That's an issue. Jermaine Lole inside. Then you got guys like Colin Simmons and Barron Sorrell off the edge. But it starts with Alfred Collins, and I just love the way he plays in the run game. That's the 5th best run defense grade among all defensive tackles in the country. Positive grade on darn near 27% of his run defense snaps, which is ridiculous. He doesn't have the traditional sacks and all the pass rushing crazy numbers that we see out of other guys, out of Abdul Carter and guys like that, but he's as good a run defender as there is in the country. He sets the tone for the rest of the unit, right? And again, blocking Collins is hard enough. Again, then you got inside Broughton and Lole, who have both been really good. They both have run defense grades above 75 this year, but Collins is the guy. And you know what I love the most about him? He's got 200 snaps in the B gaps or over the guards. He's got 100 snaps over the tackles, and he's got 100 snaps at nose guard. He can play anywhere. He could play over any of the 5 offensive linemen and be an absolute game wrecker in the run game. So I'm honestly just looking at this is maybe what my biggest concern out of this entire game for Clemson is. How in hell are we going to block these guys? Because we haven't been able to even block Virginia Tech or Pitt or SMU, all, again, teams with really good defenses and good defensive lines. And now you got to try to block Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. I think especially inside with the guards in the center for Clemson, this is a major issue because they just have not gotten Phil Maffa going at all for the better part of, 4 or 5 weeks. So, Alfred Collins there, nobody's been able to block him all season. That's the guy I'm looking at. He could come out here and play like a superstar and be the best player on the field.
Where do they find these guys? Texas does, man. We thought, remember when they lost?
It was a third fiddle last year.
That's what I'm saying. Like they lost Byron Murphy, who was a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Devontae Sweat, who is balling out this year for the Tennessee Titans.
Who can play running back if you want him to, apparently.
Exactly. Yeah. And he was there was 2, I think, the 2 highest graded D tackles in the nation last year. And I remember there's a lot of people were like, when they lost this year, like, Clemson's got a D tackle problem. And we're like, actually Alfred Collins is pretty damn good. Like I know he's on a limited role, but he was grading out at an amazing level on a limited role.
If there's any draft scouts out there who don't know about Alfred Collins yet, get to know.
Yeah,
because this is the quietest defensive line freak that anybody in the second or third round is going to absolutely love.
We put Trevor Sikkema onto him about a month or two ago, and we're like, hey, you got to watch this guy because he's on the big board yet, and he watched him. He's like, oh yeah, that is a day 2 pick right
there.
The
fact that he can line up at any of those spots for anywhere from any C gap to any A gap.
Yep.
It's such an asset, and it causes such a problem. Not only is he so good, not knowing where he's going to be on any given play, they could just change the front any way they feel like it because he's the one. And again, those other guys are all really good. Broughton's, I think, especially down the stretch here, Vernon Broughton's been fantastic too, and he's actually probably been the better pass rusher between them. But Collins in the run game against this interior offensive line scares me to death, honestly.
It just makes that D line last year just like that was ridiculous what we saw.
And having guys like this allows you to do whatever you want in coverage.
Yeah.
You can play too high if you need to. You can sit back because you go, well, they're not blocking 95 anyway. We don't need that's a guy that doesn't need safety help at all. In Texas, I think it's going to be the same thing in this game. There's a very good chance that they could defend the run with 6 in the box in this game, and that would worry me if I'm the Tigers.
And you mentioned before, Dawn, how Clemson's run game over the last 5 or so weeks has just been, Kade Klubnik being the best rusher. My match to watch overall in this game for the Clemson offense is, can Kade Klubnik be Superman? I think he's got to be Superman in this game in order for Clemson to have a chance at winning this game. He's finally started to show why he was the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school back in that 2022 high school class. The former 5-star has a 87.5 passing grade this year, 8th among all quarterbacks in the nation, 26 big-time throws as well, 6th in the nation. This is a guy last year who struggled a lot, and we were like, man, it's starting to look like a bust in terms of where he was recruited at coming out of high school. Played a lot better this year, right? A lot better. I think he's made that massive leap on. What makes him even more impressive, still an average supporting cast at Clemson. If you look at their offensive grades this year, they are 44th in offensive grade. They're 11th in passing grade, which is Kade Klubnik. Rushing grade, 47th in the country. Receiving grade, 61st in the country. Pass blocking grade, 63rd in the country. Run blocking grade, 87th in the country. The best thing they do outside of Kade Klubnik is rushing, which is 47th in the country. You just mentioned before, Kade Klubnik contributes to that rushing grade as well.
He's been their best runner for the past 5-6 weeks.
So even then, the receiving grade, pass blocking grade, run blocking grade is below the 60th in America. Average or below average this year in college football. Now you go up against Texas, the best defense in college football. They have a 94 defensive grade this year that leads all teams in the nation. 92.9 coverage grade, best in the nation. 90.2 pass rushing grade, 3rd best in the nation. No other defense is in the top 5 of pass rushing grade and coverage grade. So by all accounts, Texas has the best pass defense in college football. And South Carolina, Dawn, is one of only 3 defenses in the top 10 of coverage grade and pass rush grade. They played Clemson. They gave up 14 points to Clemson a few weeks ago. And even then, all 14 of those points, besides the extra points, were Kade Klubnik on 2 rushing touchdowns as well. He has got to be superhuman in this game in order to have a chance at an upset, or to get the ball going, really. Or Quinn Ewers has got to really royally screw it up, turn the ball over deep in his own territory, because I think that's the only opportunity. Either Kade Klubnik is Superman or Quinn Ewers royally screws it up. That's the only way I can see Clemson's offense really putting up a consistent amount of points on the board.
You said it. That's been the script in Clemson's bigger wins this year, where they're not just the more talented team, is turnover margin. Again, tied, I believe, with Notre Dame for the best turnover margin in the Power 4, and taking advantage of that. I haven't seen a points off turnover stat. I need to find one, but I'm sure they're very high on the list because, again, got a young defense full of ball hawks that get after it. And Klubnik executes when he needs to. It's really the reason the turnovers and the points off of them were the reason they beat SMU, and because they got that big lead early, and then SMU had to claw their way back, and then Klubnik made a couple of plays after that. But I think you're absolutely right. Klubnik, this would be quite a legacy game if he were to pull this off, even in a low-ish scoring game, because he's really been the most consistent playmaker for this team. Now, I do like outside that they've got Antonio Williams and Brian Wesco kind of emerging as at least something better of a threat on the end, because we thought, especially go back to that first game against Georgia, we were like, what does this team have at receiver?
Yeah.
They have nothing. But now least you have two guys. They work in Jake Briningstool, two at tight end, and I think it's a team. They don't have a ton of speed, so they got to execute at a really high level. I think the overall theme for Clemson offensively, if they're not getting those turnovers on defense, is that they have to execute on a consistent basis. Do they always do it? Not necessarily, but at least they take advantage when those easier opportunities are given to them.
Did you see, this is a little off topic, did you see yesterday that Clemson brought in a wide receiver? It's their first ever transfer commitment from a skill position player, and he's from Southeast Missouri State. I love that dude. That means Dabo Swinney is grinding the FCS tape, and he goes, you know what? I know we don't bring in transfers, but that Tristan Smith kid from Southeast Missouri State, we need that guy in our program right now. I was electric. I love that.
I was just having the thought. I'm like, man, could you imagine this Clemson team with a few transfers?
Yeah, they brought in one of them. Maybe he's a little more open to it.
I know Dabo's kind of been giving everyone the finger lately when it comes to this, and he's like, listen, I got to the playoff without him, but boy. Now you sit here and you go, well, you've gotten this far without him. Imagine your team with a handful of them, even 10 or 12 of them.
Especially with that defense, like you said, coming back next year, and potentially Kade Klubnik coming back as well. And you add a little more pieces around, and this is going to be a dangerous team that can make a run next year. But Dawn, they can make a run this year as well. Who will win this game? Will Clemson pull off what would be the biggest upset of the first round, or will Texas survive?
I got to be honest. I think this is a more dangerous game for Texas than people think. I don't love – have you seen the spread on this game?
It's 12 right now.
I don't love that. I'm a fan of the plus 12 for Clemson. I think, again, it's the Quinn Ewers factor of which Quinn Ewers are we getting? Is it Superman Quinn Ewers we see once in a while, like the first half of this second Georgia game or the Alabama games in the past or whatever? Or is it going to be the turnover kind of prone Quinn Ewers that we've seen for a good chunk of this year? I'm going to take Texas because I think Texas is clearly the better football team, right? I'm going to take them, though, 23-17. I think we get another – I think we're going to see a lot of low-scoring games this week. I think we got a lot of really good defenses playing, and these are two of them. Obviously, Texas a little more experience, and they've got just a boatload of talent. You mentioned probably the best pass defense in the country. I'll take them 23-17, but I think there's going to be moments in this game for the Longhorns that make us a little nervous about them winning. And again, if they get consistently above-average quarterback play, consistently – they can win a national title.
Yeah.
And I think Texas, I as tempted as I was to maybe find a road for Clemson here, I think it's really more about Texas is better, and they only lose if they screw it up. But I think they're going to be a little nervous for chunks of this game, but I'll take them in actually a more defensive game than people might think it is.
I think the only way Texas loses this game is if Quinn Ewers screws it up. I don't even say the whole team. I think it's Quinn Ewers. I really just come down to that. Can Quinn Ewers just be good enough? Because I think this is gone. You can make the argument it might be the best roster in college football.
I was just going to say I think we could argue that this should be the best team in college football, but it's the quarterback thing,
which is right. I hate to keep going back to this argument. Do they have the quarterback on the roster that's sitting on the bench right now? That's the question. I know they're not going to do it.
They wouldn't.
And it's very late in the year to make that kind of change now.
They were the only scenario they would do that if they were down like 14 going into halftime, and it's because of him.
Yeah.
Then they would do it. But there's a 95% chance they won't do it.
I love how everyone's like, yeah, well, quarterback for Texas is the one thing. I was like, well, they might have the answer at quarterback that's backup right now in Arch Manning. I don't know.
There is a guy. There is an option at least. There's many teams with no option.
Yeah.
They at least have.
They have an option.
We're not even sure.
They have the best backup quarterback in the country.
We don't even know if Georgia has an option in case Beck is out.
We'll talk about that next week. That'll be a big talking point next week.
But I'm with you. I think Texas is the better team, we think.
I think so.
And it's that. It's the thing that can make you most nervous on a football field.
Just look at, and people are like, wait a minute, Oregon's undefeated and all that. Oregon also has a Heisman Trophy finalist, Dylan Gabriel. Texas is not even close to that in Quinn Ewers. You look at Texas, they have the best defense in the country, the best offensive line in the country, a really damn good receiving core as well. I think this is overall, this is the best maybe roster in the country. The problem is they don't have the quarterback that can carry your team like a Dylan Gabriel can for Oregon. So I got Texas as well winning this game 31-20 because I think they are just the better team. Now, this could be a big talking point later on in the playoff when they play a better team than Clemson, like say in Oregon in the semifinals, like they'll play Oregon at that point, or even Arizona State next week, right? That could be one as well. But I think Texas will win this game 31-20. I think the only way Clemson consistently scores in this game is if Quinn Ewers consistently screws it up and turns the ball over deep into his own territory. I think the field position game is massive in this one. I think Clemson needs to have very good field position, whether it be by turnovers or whether it be by just forcing 3 and out from Texas every single time and getting punched at the 50-yard line or whatever like that. That's where I think Clemson could score consistently, because otherwise I don't see them stringing together 4 or 5 first downs and scoring drives.
80-yard drives, and
right.
Very few teams can do it on Texas anyway, right?
And not an average offense like Clemson either, right? And it only has Cade Klubnik as like the one thing that can, like the one bastion of light, which is something that we didn't think we'd be saying going into the year. But it's wild that we're saying, hey, Cade Klubnik's the one thing they got going in that offense right now. And also, Dawn, the one thing that I'm a little more confident Texas winning this game as well, I don't think this is the game that they need to rely on Quinn Ewers. I think this is kind of the game that Trey Wisner could be massive.
Yeah, they could just win this game with the defense and play in a more conservative style. Yeah.
I think so too, because I mentioned before, I think the outside zone game and how well they've done at that this year and how bad Clemson has been at containing the outside run this year, I think that's a big matchup as well. So I don't even think you could take the ball out of Quinn Ewers' hands. Now, there's going to be a game where Quinn Ewers has to win you the ball game. There will be at that point sometime in the playoff if they keep going. But in this kind of game, this might not be the game. This might be the game, hey, Quinn, just hand the ball off, and we're going to be fine without that. So I think Texas will win this game, and they'll move on to play Arizona State. Drake Holiday's Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.